Okay, you guys. So I'm gonna go ahead and I'm gonna start. Okay, you guys, I'm gonna get started. So I have to be honest with you. I'm making turkey soup tonight, and I just have to cut up the turkey. But y'all gave me such a hard time about being like an hour late for my last live. So I thought that what I would do is I'm gonna listen to an interview with you guys. And it's an interview that I did last night. I'm going to be in the chat room with you guys, and we're just going to chop it up about what's talked about in the interview, get your thoughts on it, and all of that. And so, all I was going to say is, I made myself 2 pancakes that I'm going to have with honey while I watch this with you. Well, it's a watch slash, not watch. It's a watch slash listen. So while we watch and listen to this interview that I did yesterday, I'm going to be in the chat room kind of chatting with you guys, similar to a YouTube premiere, but easier for me because I didn't have to render this interview and then upload it and da 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 da, like all that extra stuff. So I hope that you guys enjoy it. I hope that we can have some good conversations in the chat about it. But what I was saying about my turkey soup is that I am going to chop up my turkey. It's already cooked, but it just needs to be chopped up and added to the soup. So I'm going to do that. So if I'm not in the chat initially, I'm still listening in. I'm just getting my pancakes. They're already cooked, and I'm just throwing my turkey in the pot so that it can simmer while we watch this interview. Now, word to the wise, this interview is 2.5 hours long. Also, it covers a lot of topics. It covers some controversial topics, and there were some surprise guests. So I didn't know it was like a call-in kind of thing. It was like an interview where people could call in. And so Cerulean Gray actually called in, Taz, Shannon called in, like a couple of people I know here from YouTube called in, which was funny because I didn't tell anybody that I was doing this interview. I'm going to try to let the guy that interviewed me know that I'm doing this. We are not in the same time zone though, so at least I don't think we are, so that you guys have an opportunity to talk to him too. And I hope you guys enjoy it. You may learn some new things about me, and you also may get a look into my thought process, because I did have my views challenged on this interview. So yeah, it should be interesting. It gets started slow, but it gets really, really interesting after like the first 20 minutes. So I hope you guys are ready for it. I'm going to screen share with you. So you're actually going to be watching my screen. It'll show my face for like the first 5 minutes. Just ignore that. Okay. It starts to show other things, so you won't just be staring at me for 2.5 hours, just FYI. It was just easier to have my face there because y'all, I was trying to homeschool and edit this all at the same time. So with that said, let me get a screen share going. And so let me present to everyone. Okay, so I hope you guys can see that versus see me, because I'm in a house robe, y'all, so y'all don't need to see me. So I hope that this is right, because I'm not looking at what you're looking at right now. So I'm going to go ahead and...
No worries. All right, people. As I have for the very first time on Talk Real Solutions, the one and only, the beautiful Irene Yvette. Hello, Irene. How are you doing tonight?
I'm okay. How are you?
I'm good. Welcome to Talk Real Solutions. And like always, we are a platform in itself that deals with issues, and at times we come up with our solutions, even me when I do broadcast. But before we step into, because tonight is an interview, sit-down interview. So before we begin anything, I like to always tell my guests, we got to take a step back in time before we deal with the present. So tell a little bit of the people that's listening for the very first time, a little bit about yourself, Miss Irene Yvette.
My name is Irene Yvette, and I do a variety of content that deals with interpersonal relations, politics, conspiracy. I also just do silly stuff. Today I folded ties and just chopped it up with my audience. So it's a variety of things.
Okay. So like always, because before we deal with, well, it's not really much subjects right, but as we go, we'll go at the flow of the show. Besides doing that, were you more, before you came onto the scene, into the YouTube world, or anything in more of this type of platform, what were you doing before, in the past, as a woman?
You mean for work? What do you mean?
It could be anything. Work, life, everything.
I'm a consultant and a writer by trade, and I am a mother. And that's pretty much what I did with myself.
Now, in writer, you mean like writing books, articles, etc., like a news article writer?
Yeah, I've done celebrity interviews. I've written a play that went to stage. I have not written any books yet. I'm not that are published. Content, like it's a variety. When you're a writer, you kind of write whatever people pay you to write.
And is there any special subjects that you like to write, or per se that you focus on in your writing for the people that read your work?
No, there's nothing in particular. I would write typically about the same things that I talk about.
And it's just like regular issues, right? Or just
regular issues. Regular issues, things like that. Little known facts that people may not know, things like that.
Any gossip you do in your writings as well? Like, it's like a different side of things. Certain content people like to hear, like things like score on present time, or they like to hear about what other people do. Is it like how you go about in writing that form to like balance it out to keep people in like attentive in a way?
Gossip? Is that what you said?
Yeah, gossip. Like sometimes
I don't do that kind of thing.
Okay, you just keep it strictly on the information law. Okay. One thing, because I do watch your channel sometimes, and you be talking about certain issues, like systematic issues. And one particularly in regards to children. In, I guess, education. Is this something like more like you deal with, like more your focus in regards to what children learn in the education system, that you put more of a present time amongst, I guess, your own children or just children in general?
I'm not sure I follow the question, but yes, I am passionate about child education. I was having a conversation about child education before I came on your show. I homeschool, and I advocate for other people to do that. So that is something I'm very passionate about, and that I do enjoy talking about.
Now, when I mean by education, because people are not really clear about this thing about education, I call it former training. Like every time I do any shows and I tell people my views about education, I feel collectively as us as people, when we look at education, is something that we look at more than to say we just go to school, and depending on how high our so-called education from high school to college to doctorate, that most people feel that they have achieved the highest goal where they go into this so-called system of education. And to my views, I say I look at things differently, because I feel with our people, the more we get so-called educated, the more we lose touch or grips of not only reality, but how the world really works in regards to how to survive and to maintain in a system that most like 9 tenths times the work we do is not something we built. We work for mostly everybody else. So when I always look back at education, I think one of our good scholars said it best about educating people was Amos Wilson. I think in particular how the educator doesn't include power to change the dynamics of not only yourself but the people, your people. Everything you do is a form of empowering somebody else. I don't know if you agree with that statement or not. What I just said.
I agree with that somewhat. As far as to the other part of what you said, I think that we don't participate in education anymore. We participate in the art of promoting assimilation and regurgitation, and we call that education. Education would include allowing a human being to think critically for themselves, to challenge ideas, to think outside of a conformity or a box. It would encourage innovation and different trains of thought. It would encompass a variety of ways at approaching an issue, and leave the door open in many cases, especially things like advanced mathematics, which may sound pretty wild, doesn't work so well with lower level mathematics. In history and sciences, which earlier today I was speaking on my platform about how science is essentially philosophical in nature. A lot of the time, if we were truly educating, it would allow people to explore ideas and principles and bring many different trains of thought to the table, and also work outside of carefully orchestrated box. Right now, we teach children within a box, and we don't even allow them, let's say, to work out a math problem in their own way. If a child arrives, let's say, at an answer correctly, but in a way that they were not taught to arrive at that answer, that child can actually be docked. And so when we consider things like that, we aren't interested in education because the correctness of their answer is irrelevant. We're interested in the conforming nature and training their minds to think a certain way. And all education, I just use math as an example, is geared in that direction. So it is actually not education at all. What it is it is a careful conditioning to train a person to think the way you want, and to train them to expect discipline, or for it to be wrong for them to choose a different mode of thought, even if the answer that they come to or the conclusion that they come to is healthy and right in nature. And so I think that we could say safely that what we see in schools today is indoctrination, not education, and it's the art of conformity is what is taught. And as I said before, regurgitation. And I feel that's very unhealthy, and it also strips people of their individuality, and it stunts our creativity as a human species. It's just completely counterproductive to any progress that we can possibly have as human beings.
Okay. And for people that's listening in, the call number for tonight's show is 515-605-9783. I repeat, 605-9783. Press 1 if you have a question or comment. Tonight we have a sit down with Ms. Irene, Yvette. Now, in regards to, one thing, you mentioned mathematics, and this is one thing I find interesting in mathematics. I always question me about certain mathematics that is even relevant that people can apply today in the world. I'm not sure you can agree with this or not, but I feel certain things like the basic math, most people should get down already. But there's some other maps that, when I think about it, is even as useful in today's world we use, like obviously like geometry. Yeah, you need it for like certain things like constructing things, angles and stuff. Calculus, I think that's used for more engineers type work and stuff. But one thing I never really get grasped when I remember one person mentioned this, and I never thought this about algebra, but how algebra plays in regards to how you can utilize it in the world. I know you teach your homeschooling children, right, Irene? So I'm not sure if you ever think of some of the teaching your because I think you have how many kids? 5 or 6 kids. Some are adults already, but like in total, right?
Yeah,
some are still little. All right. Oh yeah. So, okay. So out of the few that still not out in the world yet. In mathematics, do you have your children try to see how it applies to them in the world, per se, in your homeschooling? Because, like as a mother, because it's a different feel when you sit there and teach them than having somebody else, like most likely a European woman, aka a caucasoid woman, teach your children? Have some of the teachers, like, let's say, math that you show to your own children how it works in the world?
Yeah, typically when I teach mathematics and if I teach the sciences, I like to do that from what would be geared toward a kinesthetic learner. So it would be activity based. And so I might teach measurements at the grocery store or when baking. I might teach addition and subtraction with tangibles. Same thing with multiplication. I try to paint visuals, and word problems are always great because that allows them to see how math is functional. When it gets into higher level mathematics, unless it is for the purpose of getting a degree, I don't really bother because, again, once we get into higher level math, the higher the math level goes, the more philosophical in nature it becomes because we start to deal in numbers and theories that don't actually exist in the real world, and we're projecting. And like you were saying, really good for some sorts of sciences, that's not something that is relevant in everyday life at all whatsoever. And remember, a lot of it is predictory and not demonstratable because some of these figures and some of the things we're doing never ever manifest in the real world, right? It's all hypothetical. So it's funny how math goes from being something very realistic and tangible and then moves off into the world as something that's completely unrelated to, let's say, our base addition, to algebra, to geometry, things that we will use on a regular basis. Now, that said, for some people, they may find themselves embracing higher levels, and I should say mid levels of math, because most of us, we never really get into higher levels of math, but mid levels of math. If you are building something, or something like that, if you're into construction or something like that, you may actually find yourself utilizing some mathematics that are mid-level. But those higher levels of math, again, are just predictory in nature and don't have any sort of physical manifestation, at all whatsoever. So, yeah, I would say that higher levels of math are kind of useless. But the lower and the mid levels of math can be, applicable to a person's life depending on what it is they're doing with their life.
Okay, good. Yeah. That's good. And that's a good way of saying it because you put it in that way. It's only when you go to a higher form is when you're trying to attain and use it for more, like I said, engineering type work where, you're trying to build something or create something. Most likely that's where you require more of the higher math. And I'm not sure anybody has to, besides you, me speaking, that most of any return maybe might tackle some higher math if they want to say be an engineer when they grow up. It's like this. Most parents will know what their children want to be by how they, I would say, conduct and what they are doing. Most likely, because they see themselves trying to be it. And I'm not sure if you groom your children into areas where they're good at, and you try to put them in the best place to harness their skill and grow their craft.
I mean, I definitely pander to a child's interest, but I try to exploit their interest to introduce them to things that they're uncomfortable with. Because if we just stay in a comfortable place and only nourish the things that we're comfortable with, then we're not going to be a rounded individual, and it's going to handicap us in some areas. So, for example, I have a son who is very into cars, right? And then I was managed to expand that into him being into vehicles. We were able to expand that into him being into robotics and engineering, and then it was astrophysics, and then then he started reading on nuclear fusion on his own. So we were able to expand this obsession with cars. He liked to line them up. He liked to make car sounds, this and that. And I would teach him. I would expand it on that. And then when I wanted to introduce something else, like if I wanted to work on reading skills, I would like like I said, he read astrophysics book, or he would, I present reading in the realm of what he liked. I present math problems, and this is the good thing about homeschooling, and word them and tailor them toward what his interest was. If we looked at science, we would focus on sciences that pandered to his interest in vehicles and in engineering and things like that. And so yes, in one way, I do like to nurture what a child is interested in. In another way, I like to use that to exploit. I like to exploit their interest to introduce them to other things that are relevant and important too. Because at the end of the day, everything folds over itself. Do you know what I mean? And so it's easy to do that, so that we have a rounded approach to teaching and learning.
Okay. And that's a very good point to know that not only you know when children might be interested and try to push them into areas where they might be settled, but also challenge them as well, which is always a good point, because one thing that most parents don't do, they don't know what their children normally want to do in life or what they're good at. They're always, and the funny thing, I'm not sure if you're noticed with back in the day, and this is probably because you're way older than me, that when children get to a certain age, like 8 or 9 or 10, or I think it's more like 8 or 7, and they ask, say, what do you want to be when you grow up? Some of them say they want to be a lawyer, doctor, these, and nothing wrong with that, but as the kid gets older, it kind of changes, I think they say that just, I think what they see, most likely, because they don't know what a lawyer is. Children don't know what a doctor is. You get what I'm saying, Irene? But as they get older, they think what they want to really be. Some of them go out and be those lawyers, doctors, but overall, they're just saying it. But when they get older and they start to look at themselves to really what they really want, or still haven't got it yet, they kind of change their views of what they really want to do as they become adults. You know what I'm saying?
I mean, I do, but I think that most people have a limited scope of what they can be. So I think the things that we hear from children when they're young are the few little things that they hear about, or the things that they hear people talking about. And I think when they get older, they still have a narrow view of what it is they can do with themselves. And that is why there are so many interesting paths a life can take. And I like to get away even from the question of what do you want to be, right? Because life can be lived in so many interesting ways. It's not just about finding a job or occupation or starting a business. It's not about that. You could travel and explore for a living. Like, I feel like we box children in and we don't let them know that this is a big world and there are no rules. You can choose to create a life that's totally unique. My little youngest daughter, Isabella, said she wanted to be an explorer, and she also wants a family. And my elder daughter said, well, how will you do that? What are you going to do with the kids? I said, she can do it. You can be an explorer, and you can take your family. There's no rule that says you can't. So that thought process, just to open up their minds and to see that this is not about discovering what you want to be, but how do you want your life to look? I think this idea of what do you want to be is why so many of us are tied, and this is okay if that's your passion, right? But we're tied to homes, we're tied to an occupation, we're tied to a daily redundant routine. That's excellent for some people. Some people thrive in that. Other people find it maddening. Those are the people you'll see constantly rearranging their house, or who constantly seem disgruntled, or who constantly need stimuli because their environment is not conducive to their health as a person. So I think I would even just get away from that question, because I find that the answers children give when they're young and the things that we get from them when they grow up are still narrowly focused and don't even begin to include the wide range of different types of lifestyles that people can have. And that's why we kind of have to expose our children to all the different types of way people live, not just jobs, but lifestyles that people live. This isn't like being rich or driving a nice car, but like a complete lifestyle, complete change. How do people live who live in remote areas, off-grid? How do people live, do you know what I mean, when they are doing nothing but studying marine life? How do people live when they live in the tundra? Like, how do these different people live, and what do you want your life to look at? How do people who are nomadic live? Not just indigenous nomadic people, but Western nomadic people. What does that look like? Can you do that? Can you just travel the whole world and it's been a great part of your life doing that? How does that work? People do it. There's a great website called The Art of Manliness that I invite people to check out, because a lot of those men there, they do that. And these are the people, when they finally do, if they ever do decide to go get a job, it's like, what have you been doing the past 10 years? Well, I've been to Russia. I've been to Africa. I've been to the North Pole. I've been, you know what I mean? And you're like, how did you do this? Because they don't live in a box. They didn't think about what they're going to be. They're thinking about, who do I want to be? What's the lifestyle that I want to have? What are my passions as a person? And what am I willing to sacrifice from conformity so that I can have that? So that's a question I don't even like to ask. I would erase that question. I advise you all just erase that question out of your minds when you're talking to children, because sometimes when we ask a question, we narrow the scope of thought. Do you know what I mean? We're automatically saying, what do you want to be when you grow up? And then we've narrowed their possibilities to only what job they can have. So we have to be careful with our wording when we approach our little ones.
You know, that's the best way of looking at it, and a proper way to look at things, because the problem with us as a community, and we are some of a community, unfortunately. All right, there's different views on people's interpretation of what a community is, but I think the world we live in now, because it's so more global now, that our people still want to, I guess, remain in a box state instead of, I would say with the children should have the option to really, you know, if they're not sure what they want to do, or they, let's say, decide to pursue the college career, right? Or anything, we should put in their mind to always seek outside the world they live in, state they live in, or anything, and try to see the world as it is. Because I think one thing what the West has done is conditioned most of our people to remain in a box and think that there is not only anything better outside of here, but that you cannot achieve anything higher. You know what I'm saying? So unless what they tell you how high you go. You know? And I find that overall to be very dangerous, because in the world, even now, the times we live in now, because of the economic situation and how people are now, that, you know, they just locking people in. Even when you hear stories like said black people might be permanent underclass in the next 30 to 40 years, I have my different views on that said, well, those that will remain and continue to do what they're doing, then yes, most likely they will potentially be in the permanent underclass. But those who said they want to change it, they might survive and sustain much better than those that think that. Because I don't really accept anything we do, because we have done great things. And I think we're going to continue to do great things if we get our minds right and take action. The things that we're not doing, and do what we should be doing today. That's how I see things. What else? Yeah, but that's my interpretation. Another thing, you know, I'm looking at, I ain't gonna look at the chat room, because the chat room kind of bullshit right now, but have you traveled? Mostly. The world yet?
I have traveled, but I also want to double back on something that you said, because when we use words like underclass and success, those words are words that we use based on a definition that we're giving, that we've been given. Okay, so success has been defined for us, and therefore when we think somebody is successful or unsuccessful, it's based on the parameters that were defined for us. So normally this means that they have money, they might be popular with their peers, maybe they're famous, maybe they have a nice car, nice clothes, designer bags. You know, for more healthier minded people, it could be that they have a close knit family, but not necessarily money. So how we define things, and same thing with underclass. Are they underclass simply because they are poor, and is that a negative thing, right? Why is not having a lot of money necessarily a negative thing? And why can't we see that a person can remain as an underclass, have their needs met, and that be okay? So it's interesting that, like, even in those definitions and the way that we view things, in the words that we use. It's just, again, it goes back to that conformist mindset. We've been given a pattern, and everything that we say, our speech, the way we view life, is all it's all within this box of definitions and terms that have been given to us, and it's hard to like see outside of that. As far as traveling, yes, I have traveled, and I look forward to traveling a lot more in my lifetime because the world is a big place.
Excellent. Okay, we covered. You know, one thing that caught my attention, and I think out of your 7 children, I'm not sure if it's 2 or 3, are the ones that is not, let's say, a part of the system, or say they don't have like the certificates, the birth certificates, or any form of, Social Security when they first came to this world. Am I right?
That's correct.
Okay. Now, one thing for people that never understand, how is that a possibility, especially in times we're in that you're able to give your own child that freedom without any pushback?
Right. Well, here's the thing. I think I love how you worded it. How is that a possibility? This is interesting because it's a possibility because that's how they were born, right? They were born without those things, and then you got those things for them. So the question isn't so much how is that a possibility, because that's how they came into the world, is without this paperwork, right? The question is, why did you go get your kid the paperwork? You know what I mean? Like, you don't have to. So why did you volunteer to go get a birth certificate and get a social security card? I mean, they ask you. If you read the form, it says this form is voluntary. Filling out this form is voluntary. When you go into the hospital, they go, would you like us to apply for a social security card for you? They ask you, right? The same thing when they come to ask you for the information to fill out the birth certificate, they start asking you questions. So, just because somebody asks you or offers you something doesn't mean you have to take it. So it's possible because you're born with that freedom. It's for each of us to give up that freedom for our child. So that's more the question. It's not how, because we're born free. It's a matter of why do you agree to take what is offered? What is the benefit there? So again, I'm not necessarily against people who do it, but I do think we have to be informed, understand that we're making a choice. I mean, if you need to get social services, welfare, things like that, if there are just certain things that you need to do, then you will definitely need it. If you want to work for the government, you're going to need to have those documents. But if you're not going to be doing those things, it's not a requirement. So I'm just of the school of exercise your rights. Now, my children may choose to do whatever they want to do when they get older. That's their choice. I just choose not to make that choice to find them myself as their parent.
Okay. All right. And like you said before, it is only voluntary. So let's say if you give birth in a hospital, they'll ask you, and you could deny or don't want to get that birth certificate still out. Right, but don't the hospitals pressure people and scare people?
Yeah, well, here's the thing, and this is why it's really good to do home birth if you can. The hospital is a business, okay? And they are required by law, when a child is born in their hospital, they have to report that they facilitated that. That is different from you applying for a birth certificate. Them reporting what they do and you reporting on your child are just 2 different things. But the thing is that you have to be careful how you deal with the situation, because people are ignorant and don't understand that. Do you know what I mean? So if you don't live in a very progressive place like, say, California, then the chances that they've encountered anybody who's not getting a birth certificate are slim to none. So sometimes you have to use the language of people who are uninformed and ignorant, and you have to deal with them in their ignorance without like triggering all kinds of alarm bells because they don't understand what's going on because you didn't conform. Remember, that goes back to we're trained for conformity. So then when somebody isn't conforming, we start to like get hostile because we're like, oh my gosh, this person's not conforming. Like, what are you talking about? That's not what I've heard. That's not what I've been told. That's not how we do things. So people start to go into panic mode. So the goal is to keep the conformed mindset from panicking because they can't understand your freedom, right? They can't understand that you're not conforming and that's okay and legal. So what I always say is when you're in a hospital, if you have to give birth in a hospital, which most people do, or choose to because they're very concerned, or maybe you have an issue where you do need an OBGYN, you can't use a midwife, or whatever the case is. But I am going to be doing a home birthing video because you can birth children at home. I know a woman who birthed all 15 of her kids at home, and she just delivered somebody else's baby last month. So it is perfectly possible to do this with just you and your husband. But with that said, if you are in a hospital setting, what will typically happen is they will ask you or your husband to go down to the room. They'll try to call you, okay? So they'll see if the husband can either come down to their little room, and everybody's familiar with this room. It's the room you go to when they ask, like, your name, your race, do you want a social security number? It's that room. So the husband's going to go, no, I'm not going to come down, right? So then by day 2, they're going to be getting a little antsy because, you're slipping their radar, and they're going to call you, or they're going to come to your room, and they're going to say, can I ask you a few questions, about you and your spouse? And you're going to go, not right now. We'll come down before we leave, or maybe we'll come down before we leave if you don't want to be outright deceptive. You're going to send them away. So you're just going to dodge them every time. You're not going to get into a debate with them about the legality of it. And you're not going to, it's not necessary to do all that. It's just let them know, not right now. We'll come down on our way out, whatever it is. And then when it comes time for you to leave the hospital, you just don't go. Just leave. And they'll still do their reporting. They'll do it baby girl, baby boy, whatever your last name is or your spouse's last name is. They'll do their reporting. They'll be fine. That's a totally different thing from you getting a birth certificate for your child. So those are 2 totally different issues. Again, this can all be avoided, though, by simply not giving birth at a hospital, because then your individuality and freedom is crossing over their obligation as a business. Do you know what I mean? So it's better if those 2 things don't cross over, but if they have to cross over, that's how you would handle it. You would simply very kindly tell them, I don't want to just, answer those questions right now. We'll come down before we leave. Maybe, I wouldn't say another time. I think we'll come down before we leave is probably the best answer, and then just don't bother to go. And they can't do anything. They're not going to send anybody. Like, it's perfectly legal for you to do that. It's just to avoid the conversation, because if you get into the conversation with them, they're not going to understand it. You know what I mean? And then, you don't want to do that after giving birth.
Okay, so you have to be very slick in your actions, especially if you decide to go to the hospital to give birth, and then try to, I would say, avoid them, or try to get away from the hospital without enforcing you to sign any type of documents, because it is your right. No one can force it. No one's gonna. I think I went to know some stories one time, but maybe some people might attempt to do it, and then you see them call police or to try to keep the child in the hospital, and say that's illegal.
Yeah, I've never heard of anything like that. I've never heard of anything like that.
Yeah, if things like that is going on, then what the hospital doing is actually illegal. If they're going to Texas, because like I said, it's a business, and they only make money once they get a birth certificate. Because, like I said, a birth certificate, it gets on paper for the state. The state makes money by how much kids there. Each person is money. You don't know this, so they know record of how much what's Yeah, but I follow you. Funny thing with home births, I think you could show that on YouTube. I don't think that would be a problem because that's a natural thing. It won't be like like a censor thing, right? Because
I'm not going to show an actual home birth. Many women have done that already. Okay. I was going to go through what you need, where you order the supplies that you need, like the sterile equipment, stuff like that. And then for watching home birth, there are many people on YouTube that do that. When you're in a hospital, it's just very important that you recognize that you are under no legal obligation to get a birth certificate. It's not necessarily being slick, it's simply being wise and avoiding the confrontation, right? So let's say that you can't avoid the confrontation. This person, you know, some people like are very committed to their job, and you know they act like the business is theirs, and it is. So let's say you get cornered with it. Then at that point, you simply assert, and I've had to do this at least once. I don't have a name for my child right now. I don't want to give any information for me and my spouse. We're not looking for a birth certificate at this time. If you need to report the birth, I understand your hospital has to do that. Can you please just do it as baby boy, baby girl, you know, whatever it is, you know, your procedure is. So my last name, and just do it that way. And then you give them no other information. So if it really comes down to it, you can just basically go into it. You don't have to go into anything else, though. The thing is, just keep it simple, I guess, is my point. Whenever you encounter a situation, I always say be prepared and keep it simple. So that's the same thing when you're trying to work without a Social Security card and you're using a passport instead. Because you don't have a Social Security number. I say keep it simple. You don't have to go into Social Security law with them, Just point at the Homeland Security form, that I-9, and say, I am choosing to use one item from column A, my passport, period. And that's my option. Homeland Security even says so. I'm not using two items from column B. I am using the one item from column A. So you just keep things simple for people, because it's too much for somebody with a conformist mindset. You don't want to bombard them with information. You treat them like simpletons. You just keep it simple. So simply, I don't want to talk to you right now. Simply, we'll come on our way out. Simply, we don't have a name for our child right now. I don't want to give you our information right now. I understand you have to report the birth. Can you just report it under baby girl, baby boy, whatever our last name is? Just keep it simple, short, sweet, without a lot of conversation. You don't owe them the conversation, and you will make more problems than you need trying to get a person to understand something that they're not prepared to understand. Do you know what I mean?
Okay, I get you. Okay. Yeah, I follow. Because like I said, and the purpose I bring this question up because I find it still odd because it goes back to conformity. A lot of people feel it's safer to conform into a system than challenge it. And you know, giving birth, especially in the hospital where, you know, you make the choice to sign a birth certificate or give your children certain, you know, paperwork so they can operate under the system. And it brings, I would say, a fear to some people, because some people say, well, how are my children going to survive in the system? You know, they need this birth certificate, they need the Social Security, because they got to, you know, work among the system. They can't go outside the system. It brings a sense of fear. And I don't see much people really do it among some people, you know. Maybe I heard some have done it, and some never attempted, but it's very a small percentage that have done it. So you're the first woman that I've actually witnessed that's not really running off her mouth, but actually have said done it. You know? And, you know, I'm not sure how more you can prove it. I mean, unless you want to show some paperwork, but you know, that's irrelevant right now.
Well, yeah, I have no, so I can't show it, right?
Yeah, so, you know,
but what I do on my channel is I do provide you with the government information. I provide you with the forms that the government needs from you in order to get a passport for your child when you don't have a Social Security or birth certificate. I direct you to just reading the Social Security application yourself, you know, just things like that. So I'm not one of those people that is like going to say a whole bunch of things that are not backed by the actual facts. And so I provide links to the government website and exactly what you need in step-by-step instructions on how to do this properly. So again, these are lesser known things, of course, but they are still our rights. And so if some of us don't exercise our rights, that's how we lose rights. That's why we're in a position now where, you know, people are like, you don't have to get a Social Security number. Really? Because everybody automatically does it. So we have to stop doing things automatically, and we have to start using critical thinking. Again, no choice is necessarily wrong if it's right for you, but we should do things with an understanding. I think that's super important. And I think it's not just I think it's more that people who are not affluent don't do this because they often need those things, right? So if you are in dire need of, let's say, social health care, then you will have to get a social security number. You won't be able to get around it. Your child's got to have one. You know, so there are things that are harder for people. The thing is this, being free isn't easy, right? So if you're living debt free, if you're not going to be the one who's going to get the $900,000, $1 million home, $200,000 home on a loan, right? That means you've got to work, you've got to be disciplined, you've got to save. So the same thing with not having a security number. That means that you're going to be responsible for yourself. And so it just means that we got to grow up. We have to be big adults in this world. We can't be children. And that is hard for a lot of people because we don't realize how dependent we are on the system until we don't have access to the system's presence. And so people have to make a choice. Is your freedom or your child's freedom worth what the government is able to offer you? And mind you, you're binding them to a lifetime of paying of taxes. You're binding them to a lifetime of having their checks garnished for Social Security retirement, because people aren't practical enough to save for their own retirement. You're binding them to essential ownership by the government. You're binding them to a loss of privileges as an individual when you make this choice for them as children. That's fine if that's your choice, but I think that each individual should have the choice to sell out their own freedom. You know what I mean? That's something we shouldn't be doing for other people. In my opinion, even if it's beneficial to you to enslave your child, I would opt to not do so if I were in other people's position.
Okay, I agree. All right, I follow you. I got one caller. Let me check who's calling and see what this is. Ready? I'll just open one line. I'm going to raise it here. All right.
Okay.
All one. May I ask who I'm speaking to? All one. All one's going once. All one's going twice. For her. All right. Well, they're going to press one again. And you know, it's funny too. If we could save our children, so what's the tricky thing about the average person that's trying to get away from the system? That already was born with the birth certificate and the Social Security.
Yeah, I think this is where we get into dangerous territory, because there's all those people like the Freeman and stuff like that that are like, write to the Social Security office and rescind your Social Security number, and there's some random thing where your birth certificate is worth money and and they misconstrue laws and policies and twist them to mean something other than they are. I don't like to play those kind of games. If you have a Social Security number and you work with your Social Security number, you will have to pay income tax. There are some things you can't get out of in this life. You know, once you've entered into this permanent contract, there's no weaseling your way out of it. Now, there are things you can do to minimize the damage, right? So you can minimize the damage by doing things like incorporating your name, working under a tax ID, which means that you can't be an employee of somebody, right? You have to work independently.
You gotta have your own LLC. I'm saying incorporate your own LLC, and you have to employ over 500 people to get out of that 20% tax bracket that Trump put in. Most of them own their business. You know what I'm saying? Corporations gotta be under that just to pay less tax or pay no tax on the other. But you have to fall under those type of rules to get out of that. And a lot of people that, let's say, work for somebody, you're not going to get out of that.
Yeah, and I think that's the harsh reality of it, but that should be something that teaches us why we don't want to do this to our children. Because you really are sold upriver, and there are no ways to get out of it. And I just encourage you to just back away from YouTube when you watch these videos and they're going into court talking about I'm a free man on the land and da-da-da. Like, no. Okay, that's not, no. We have to free generation, and you'll just have to accept that your parents didn't realize that they were selling you out, and they did. And all we can do is navigate the best we can. You can disappear. Stop taking loans. Don't use credit cards. Don't bother with your credit report. Keep your paper trail minimal. So you can minimize impact. You can minimize impact. You'll also have to minimize your lifestyle. But you have to decide what is more valuable. Again, it comes back to that. Perhaps your freedom is not worth being bothered with the difficulty of being free. Perhaps you are more comfortable as a slave, and that's okay. You know, I'm not here to cast judgment on that, but you just have to recognize the reality is not going to be easy, and your life will be very different from what it looks like now.
Okay. I can't argue with that because, and the funny thing about it, you hear these so-called Moors come out, they have gotten through the system, but they still go see the system for permission. I don't know. There's something else, man. And I know you might have got conflict with some of these Moors on your channel, have you?
No, I don't know who they are. What do you mean Moors?
Moors? Oh, good. Don't worry about it. If they haven't really got at you yet on your channel, you're good. Trust me, you don't want to know. All right. I think somebody's roasted. Raise their hand. I'm going to open the line again. And for people that's calling for the first time, if you have a question and comment, the calling number is 515-605-9783. I repeat, 515-605-9783. Press 1 if you have questions or comments. So the next line, open up. 651. Can I ask who I'm speaking to?
Oh, greetings, esteemed brethren. This is Cerulean.
Oh, good evening, Cerulean Gray. How you doing? What's your question? Really?
Oh, no, I was listening to the show, and with black people, and I know this may sound a bit harsh, but we gotta get out of a lot of this magical thinking. We completely think too magically. We think in terms of aspirations and hoping and wishing. Okay? Does anyone know why the birth bonding system was created?
I'm not sure.
Well,
do you know, Irene?
No, Cerulean, will you expand on that?
The birth bonding system basically helped America rescue itself from the pits of the Depression, which is why they created this socialist program called the birth certificate.
And what time? What time you created?
That was around 1936.
Okay.
It's what helped pull America out of the Great Depression.
After Social Security that came in 1933, right? 3 years later, right?
Yeah.
Okay. I just want all the time. I want people to follow receipts, the timeline, so people can look this up. Continue, brother.
So by just after World War II, around 1948, there's this amendment that is amended in the law, basically saying if you have a child that isn't on the birth certificate, now in order for you to basically participate in American commerce, you needed one. So this isn't enforced until 1954, because this is a time where you have kids that basically grew up during the time of the end of the Depression. They would be, around in their late teens, early 20s, around 1954. And there were a good amount of the population that still did not have birth certificates. And so what happened in 1954, in order to participate in commerce, you had a bunch of these people that didn't even have birth certificates. Okay?
Yeah. Mostly now 18 years of age.
What the birth certificate entails means that when you pay taxes when you pay taxes, it goes into one of the various social programs. For instance, public schools, which, as you know, schools were actually being desegregated in the 50s. The lunch programs, Boy Scouts, back when, Boy Scouts was a part of a government program for industrial education for boys. And by the 60s, now it's mandatory. If you wanted to get a job in America, you actually are required to have a birth certificate. You are required to have a social security card. If you have any intention on traveling to and fro outside of the borders of the United States, you need a birth certificate. As a matter of fact, the only country in the world right now that allows people to get passports without some kind of a birth certificate or even a visa is India. In India, you don't need it.
Oh, sorry. Go ahead. Finish.
Now, what happens when you refuse a birth certificate, you're actually taking all of your kids' rights away because they have no rights as American citizens, and now their rights become privileges.
Okay, can I just interject here? Do you mind? Lillian, do you mind?
Yeah, what are you about to say? Irene, go ahead.
I was just gonna say that I'm just gonna read from travelstate.gov, which is our government passport department. I did have a video that covers this where I took everybody to the site. But I'm going to read to you the process for obtaining a U.S. passport without a birth certificate or Social Security card, because you can obtain a passport. I'm sorry.
It's the same process by which foreign nationals and immigrants use to get the passports here in America whenever they desire to travel to and fro, because it becomes a privilege at this point. It's not a right.
Well, I can't speak to that, but what I will say is that in the cases of people like my children who don't have birth certificates or Social Security cards, if you go to the passport department and you would like a passport for your child, a passport can be used in place of a Social Security card to work, and it's actually illegal to request a Social Security number from someone who offers a passport. So that's the law of the land. If you want to get a birth certificate if you want to get a passport from the government, all you need to do is you'll have to go into your local registrar's office. You'll have to get a letter of no record, meaning there's no record of your child's birth from there, which you won't have if you didn't obtain a birth certificate. And then you go and in front of a passport official or a notary, you and another person present for your child's birth sign off saying that you were present for the child's birth. So this could be the other parent even. And you also have to submit early public or private documents. So my kids don't have birth certificates, so this could be like the crib sheet from the hospital. They even accept baptismal certificates. They accept early school records, even a family Bible record the government will accept. They also accept early records of postnatal care, so those first few appointments that your child has after they are born. And if you go to my YouTube page and you look where I talk about how you function in society without a birth certificate or Social Security card, I actually take you to all the government websites. I give you links to everything that our government requires, and I go over it really in depth. So it is legal to not have a birth certificate in our country. You can obtain a passport.
Let me pause right there. This is why most Black people have this magical thinking and do not understand the difference between a right and a privilege. Whenever you take your kids off of the birth bonding system, all of their rights at that point become privileges. To be secure in your persons and property and all that becomes a privilege. That becomes a privilege that the government can take away at any point. Understand that privileges and rights are two different things.
Can they not? They can do that they do that all the time to people with birth certificates, though. That's the population.
They do that all the time. It's called stop and frisk. The problem is that most black people don't know that they're having their rights violated every time they stop and frisk. But however, there would be no kind of repercussion for a stop and frisk and having their rights violated without a birth certificate. At least with the birth certificate, that option is available. That's the difference between a right and a privilege. Rights, if they're violated, you can sue the person or the intergovernmental body that is responsible for violating those rights. They take away a privilege; those are things you cannot be sued for. And so, what has really happened is, one, black people are not at a strategic or a logistical point to where it is viable to take kids off of the birth bonding system. And the primary reason that is because, one, you're already paid into the tax system. That's still no fault of your own. And so now when you take your kids off at this point, you don't have a strong enough, one, community. You don't have a collectivized monetary institution where all of your money is centralized into political and legal executing bodies. So what you're doing is you're really putting your kids more at risk because now you're paying taxes for a program they very well may not even be able to use.
Now that is true. I do agree with that. And I do agree with that. When your kids don't have birth certificates and Social Security cards, every single program that the Office of Human Capital offers pretty much comes off of the table because you're not human capital for the country. So for a lot of these programs you do, which is why I said if you want welfare, if you want earned income tax, those are things you cannot get. So again, it's one of those things where you have to decide, do you sacrifice your child's freedom for your comfort? And that's why we only find that people who are affluent tend to not have these documents for their children because they can afford to do that. So that's why I said life looks very different for you when you don't have these documents.
One where you're mistaken is that people that are more affluent, say they have things like money, they have things like land, they have things like resources, and because the number one robber of generational wealth is taxes, it actually becomes a benefit for them not to get those kind of documents for their children. The difference between that and most of Black America is that more than 2/3 of Black America is literally under the poverty line. The only difference between us and other countries is that we have a vast system of credit that is being propped up by the government that hides the reality of poverty. We have the encroachment of China that offers the creature comforts of home at a discounted price. I mean, virtually crackhead prices, which is why crime has gone down. The checks haven't gone up, and people are working harder than they've ever worked to get less further than they were 2 generations ago. And so people are working twice as much and getting half as far. So you can save all you want. If you make under, as a matter of fact, by the Department of Health and Human Resources, there's a good chance that a child will be brought into debt if they have a parent that doesn't make at least $287,000 per year. There's a good chance they'll be basically in a generation broke.
Yeah, I mean, this is what I would say. Yeah, I was just going to say that it is definitely harder, there is no doubt, for a person who doesn't have the resources, like Cerulean said, to do this, which is why we don't see it commonly done in our community. However, what I would say is sometimes, and again, this has to be a personal choice, because as I said earlier, there are some people where they may need these programs, and so it's simply not an option for them to not go along with this. But if you are willing to live an uncomfortable life for the next generation, then I would strongly advise to do that, because the thing that I would say is that if we don't use our rights, we will lose our rights.
Like most black folk, more than 2/3 of black folk are already living an uncomfortable life. And so without a birth certificate, they'd actually be doing a hell of a lot less. They'd be doing worse than what they are now. Why? Because, one, the government, and to work for the government does require you to have citizenship.
Yes, working for the government does. That's true. That's true.
20% of all black Americans, the biggest employer for black Americans is the government. Our fight with when talking about so-called white supremacy is twofold. One is economic, and the other is political. And so you'd actually be shooting, or black folk that are taking their kids off of the birth certificate would actually be doing the next generation a great disservice at this point, because you don't have the political resources. You aren't currently organizing the economic resources, so that would basically be shooting black people as a whole, the black community in general, in the foot while they're trying to gain these things.
Yeah, so I guess where I disagree in that is that there are certain things I think we can do. I think people spend money often, even those who are poor spend money on things that they could live more economically and have a fuller life. So a lot of things are lost. Knowing how to buy raw materials for food and cook from scratch, the ability to have a small garden or working as a community for community gardens, the ability to sew simple clothing, things like that. Living a more pragmatic lifestyle where life skills are truly used, using money for things like cable, for extra incentives and things like that. Not having vices like smoking or drinking. Those sorts of things take money out of the home. When you buy processed foods, that is more expensive and less healthy for your family. So a complete change in lifestyle has to be had when you aren't taking a handout from anybody and you're completely dependent on your own. And that's why earlier in this conversation, I was saying it is the difference between behaving like an adult and behaving like a dependent child.
Because that's another dog whistle that the conservative right. Yeah.
Hold on, line. I have two lines. Let me open these lines, because I want people waiting. Hold that thought, brother. All ones, who's this?
Big J here.
Stay right there. Let's see who else is online.
Brady.
All ones?
Big J, what's been good?
Hold on. All ones, who's this? Hello? Yes, who's this? Okay. All right, finish your statement, Cerulean.
Oh, greetings, esteemed Big J, by the way. Let's have to pause right there with the whole government handout spill. You go back and read the Two-Party South by Alexander P. Lamas. That rhetoric is a dog whistle that was used as a result of the Southern strategy. Tell black folk they need to pull themselves up by the bootstraps. While the same very people that are being given all sorts of government handouts. I don't know what black people don't understand about politics, but all politics is quid pro quo. You get something for something. Everyone else in this country has gotten something for their political support. Black folk were the only ones that go to the polls, talk about I'm going to vote, and never have any demands. And then what happens is that some foreign group, or whether it be whites, Asians, Hispanics, or otherwise, tell you that you got to stop looking for a handout. These are not handouts. I reassert these are not handouts, but these are things that have already been paid for by our predecessors.
Well, this is what I would say. It's not about that to me. It's about the fact that when you engage the government, there is a loss of privileges. So let's say you live in a community where housing is very high. There are certain privileges you have when you have your own home or when you're renting from a private party that you lose when you take on government housing. Then you lose a lot of those privacy protections that you have under the law. So my argument for separating from taking things from the government is that when you take, just let me finish, please, is that when you take a government benefit,
Let her finish.
when you take a government benefit, you lose a personal freedom. So that's my personal feeling about dealing with the government, is that there's always a loss of personal freedom. When you take welfare benefits, for example, then you lose a lot of freedom of your privacy. In those cases, they can come by your home warrantless, look through your home. In those cases, they're able to invade your privacy as far as getting into your work history, monitoring your spending. It makes you more susceptible to dealing with CPS. So there's a loss of freedoms that come from dealing with the government. And that's my personal reason for encouraging people to not take benefits from the government, because they give you nothing for free. There is a loss to you there. Now, the loss is worth it for some people. It is. But each person has to make that choice for themselves.
Can I say something, please?
Yes, Ms. Ottawa, you can say something. Go ahead.
Good evening.
Go ahead. Listen.
Initially, when I had them, on the midwife footprint on it, and I went, and when my children got old enough to go to school, I took that birth certificate from my midwife to school with me. They accepted it finally, but maybe 2 or 3 years later, I end up going to get state birth certificate because school system. I think your conversation. Hello?
Yeah, you were cutting out a little.
Yeah, because I'm not sure if you're pausing. You might have to repeat what you said, because you were sounding good, and then there was a pause. Then you go again.
I asked, what was her name? The young lady that's speaking, what is her name?
My name is Irene, ma'am.
Hi, Irene. My name is Adwa. What I wanted to say about the birth certificate is that really, once you get a birth certificate, your child becomes ward of the state. And parents lose a lot of rights once they get the birth certificate. There are other things that we get, like tracking how you spend money. The driver's license, it's not for driving, it's for tracking your movement of currency. You can't cash a check without a driver's license. You can't cash that check if the driver's license is expired. Your identification hasn't expired. You are who you are. But because your driver's license expires, you're not able to go and cash a check or even use that ID as. So I'm interested in what you're saying, because I can see the loopholes myself. Now, I do know that the birth certificates are on the stock market, and what you say about freeing the future generations, I think this is a serious thing we need to look at, because the debt that is generated with these fiat dollars that we spend, that's on the backs of us, that national debt. So that's my contribution.
Yeah, that's a good contribution. I'm glad you brought up how it works at the elementary level. I have experience with my eldest child of him attending a community college without a Social Security card. So I took him out of the high school system and I put him in a community college so that he could graduate early and take some classes that they didn't have. Now, this is an Office of Human Capital program through the Department of Education, the concurrent enrollment program. And what they did, because he didn't have a Social Security number, is they zeroed it out, which is what they do for foreign students. However, he did have a passport, so he is technically still considered a U.S. citizen, and then that's how you gain your benefits. I would say get your child's passport early. You don't need to be traveling to do that. And if you simply go to the government's website, it tells you clearly how you can get that child's passport without supplying a birth certificate or Social Security card, and that indicates citizenship. So that might speak to Cerulean's concern about the inability to have the benefits of citizenship. Mm-hmm. That's how you can circumvent that system. That's personally what I do in my own life.
Well, that's interesting, and really the reason that we don't make good decisions is because we either don't have the information or we have been given deceitful information. And so I'm glad to hear you talking about this, because what you're saying, I didn't know that you could use a passport as a birth certificate.
And I just want to, I'm looking at education.gov, which is our government's website for those of you who are interested in lower level elementary enrollment for students without a birth certificate. And it clearly states at 8.5 that there is no suggestion that states or districts must or should require a birth certificate. Furthermore, state laws setting forth enrollment requirements typically either make no mention of birth certificates or expressly permit parents to provide alternative documents to demonstrate that a child meets a school's district age requirements to enroll. So again, and that's from the Department of Education. So for people, you just have to be prepared when you go in, because a lot of times people are not informed because so many of us aren't making these choices. But if you have done your research as a parent, you know what needs, you know what the policy is, then you're able to go in prepared, and that makes these processes a lot easier. Having had to do this, many years over, I've been a mom for 25 years. Having done that many times over, I can tell you it gets easier with time, but the first time's always hard if you're the first person they've encountered to ever do it. But that doesn't mean that it's not legal. You just have to be prepared so you make the process as easy for them as possible, that you can be informative and, like I said, brief and to the point, not a lot of conversation is how we have to approach these situations. But like I said, I'm reading directly from the Department of Education's website. So if you cannot homeschool like I do, but you need to send your child to a school that's funded by the Office of Human Capital, you are allowed to do that according to our government and those funds that they provide to the public school system. So again, states are making no mention of it and expressly permit parents to provide alternative documents to demonstrate that a child meets a school district's age requirements to enroll. Depending on the state district, alternative documents could include, but are not limited to, a religious, hospital, which is what the lady was saying she used for her child, hospital record, or physician certificate showing a date of birth. And you can go get your hospital records directly from your hospital if you lost your crib sheet. And entry in a family Bible. I tell you guys, keep your Bibles, because even those entries in your family's Bible as birth are legal to our government. An affidavit from a parent, this is the same thing that is required from a passport. It's to sign something saying you were there for your child's birth. The woman who gave birth can sign that. The father, or if you have a family member come into the room, they can sign that birth affidavit. It's perfectly legal. We're hearing it again. We heard it first on the government's website for passports requirement, and now we're hearing it again at the Department of Education site. School districts should make parents aware they have to do this for you of any alternative that exists as part of their efforts to ensure a welcoming and inclusive environment for all students. This is the law. They have to accommodate you.
Irene, I beg pardon, but what law and what section of the law does it say that?
has different laws, right? Big A?
That's why though I'm asking, because for certain states,
what Big J is alluding to is that the language that is being used, .gov websites, it always comes down to discretion by the states, otherwise states' rights. They don't have to do any of that. They don't have to accommodate anything. If you're not on paperwork as a citizen, they don't have to accommodate you at all. And that comes down to states' rights. This is what Big J is alluding to.
So they actually do, because the schools are federally funded. So how Office of Human Capital Programs work is this: specifically looking at the Department of Education. So I advise you all to look at and learn the structure of how the Office of Human Capital to fund public schools. Can I finish? The Office of Human Capital is over many parts of government. One of them is the Department of Education. The Department of Education at the federal level regulates all publicly funded schools in this country. And so I am reading from the authority over the public schools of the state. And the authority, the Department of Education federally, and you guys can research this on your own to vet it, federally creates the rules that are used at the state level. The state can make choices within those rules, but they don't get carte blanche because it is a federally funded school. These schools are federally funded. And if you notice, the wording did talk about state requirements. It says that the districts are required to make parents aware of any alternatives that exist. So that is a requirement from the federal government to states that use federal money to fund their schools. Now, if your child is attending a private school, this would not be applicable to you because that school is not taking federal funds. This is for federally funded public schools, which is what most students in this country do attend.
Very good.
See, it goes back to what Big J was alluding to. It goes back to states' rights. This is why I have to pause you right here, even though you kept going on. You're talking about federal funding. Okay. Where does federal funding come from? It is secured by who? Taxpayers. This is the reason why states do not have to accommodate if they don't want. It is always beholden onto the parent to seek these alternatives. So if they don't tell you or accommodate you, they're well within their rights not to do so, because that is your responsibility. You're not paying into the tax system, or your kid is not paying into the tax system. They're not even technically a citizen, because all of the methods that you talk about, going to get a driver's license, going to get a passport, is using the same process as immigrants and foreign nationals use whenever they come to this country. It's the same process. Those rights that would have been rights are now privileges. See, and privileges can be taken away. Rights are granted. Rights are granted at birth. And that's the difference between the magical thinking. I'm talking about dealing in reality. You're talking about a population in which more than 2/3 are under the poverty line. There's no jobs coming back. And then you tell them to take the kids off of the birth system. When they don't even have the political or economic base to actually change this in, say, 10 or 15 years.
Right, but our government is telling us that the
Cerulean. But Cerulean.
Young man, would you please give us more clarity on this thing you're saying about privileges and rights?
Because and plus Cerulean, you and Irene did not give me what law and what section of a law that proclaims what y'all are advocating for.
Because those are privileges. I'm not advocating for that. Those
I didn't think you advocated.
Rights would be a part of of laws. Privileges will be a part of statutes. There are no accommodations literally for statutes. Those are privileges. Driver's license, that's a statute. That's a privilege. Okay?
Yeah, what I would provide, and I would be in agreement with ruling on that. One is for enforcement and penalty, and another is not. So, what I would provide, if I had a place to drop a link, would be that I would provide the government resource for it. I mean, if our government is saying it's this case, then they're the one that's going to deny you or approve of whether or not they accept your citizenship to their country, right? So if our government says that a hospital crib sheet is good enough to prove your citizenship, or that a signed affidavit from two people present for the birth of a child is enough to prove citizenship to them, then they are the final authority on it, right? If our government is telling us, that we only give passports to citizens, but if you have a Bible where you've written down that your child has been born, we accept that as proof of birth in the United States and citizenship, then that is proof, just period. You don't need a birth certificate. It's not even debatable, and everybody right now can go to travelstate.gov and see that for yourself. I mean, everybody has the power to go to our government's websites on their own and read for yourself. It's right there. Everybody has the power to go to the Department of Education's website and see what the birth certificate requirements are in your state and at the federal level. And you will find it is consistent with what I'm presenting here. You don't even have to take my word for it. This is something you should vet on your own anyway, because I can say anything, anybody can say anything, but you have the power to go look this up yourself, and I encourage you to do that. When I give my talks on my channel on subjects like this, I typically share my screen, I go to all these websites, and I provide all the links, but you guys can do that footwork on your own in this situation, and I encourage you to do that. Cerulean brings up many good points, a lot of which I agree with. I'm sure you're hearing what I am saying, but I encourage you to go and do the research yourself. It's very simple. Go look at travelstate.gov. Go look at your local local education Department of Education website. Look at your federal Department of Education website. Go to the Office of Human Capital's website. Get an understanding of how this money filters down and how your tax dollars are used for the benefit of the human capital of this country, which are its people. And I encourage you to do that. And then when you come to these conversations, you can come to the conversations with an understanding for yourself and not just taking somebody's word for it, because we may seem like we know what we're talking about. I encourage you to vet everything that's said for yourself, and you can do that. That's what I had to do as a mother and as a citizen of this country, and that's what you have to do too.
All right, before we continue the conversation, hold on, guys. Hold on. Let me check this line. All ones. Who's this?
What's going on, man? JNYC.
Okay. JNYC. Okay. Any other are you any other statements? Sorry, or any other further questions or before the J?
I don't want to be an asshole. I don't want to be an asshole, but y'all still gonna answer the question. What codified, what statute or what law stated where like you didn't have to sign for a birth certificate and what may have you? I mean, y'all really didn't get in.
Well, that's the thing, Big J. It doesn't exist because it wasn't amended into law. And now we're getting back into that argument between rights and privileges. Rights are secured by laws. Privileges are not. And so therefore, nobody can give you that law where it's written in law because it was never amended into law.
Well, I'm just saying
It would be in the educational code. It would be in the educational code. It wouldn't be a law. It would be in code, and it would be in the educational code, specifically what we're talking about, school enrollment. It would be under code because they're not laws per se. It would be under the code. Yeah.
But I'm asking you, what code would that be under?
Oh my goodness. Look it up. Shit. Do your own work. She told you where to go.
If I can find it while I'm on this show, if I can look up the exact code for you, I absolutely will. What I will say for those of you who are wanting to do research and you're wondering about the code, if you go to the Department of Education's website, anytime that it states something on the Department of Education's website, it will normally have a link to the corresponding code. And so that's another way that you can do it if you're not as proficient, because educational code is very lengthy. It's extremely lengthy. So I've done it. Like, I've definitely gone through educational code and just even the health codes and things like that themselves. But it is a bit tedious. But if I can literally find you the code while I'm on this program, I will. I actually am just looking through the educational code right now, if that will help you. But again, if you are going to the Department of Education website for your state or federal level, then it's on the website too. So you don't have to go to the code, although you can, and they will cite the code there, but it is still it's still federal information. And I'm with Cerulean on a law and what's codified, like, education, healthcare, social services, those aren't really the same thing at all. Okay, so I actually have it. So it's Educational Code EDC 48,002. That's what it is. So there you go.
Okay.
I'm looking at California, though. It'll be different for your state. So for example, if you're in the state of California, because I can't do this for all 50 states.
Right.
Yeah, if you're doing it. But if you're in California, it's Educational Code 48,002, 48002. That would be the code for it. You would have to find the code in your respective state. Like, nobody can do that footwork. There's just 50 states. I can't look up that specific code on what qualifies. I'm sorry?
He's in Texas, the state that you were in before you moved.
Yeah, I was in Texas.
All right. Jay, you have any questions? Jay, NYC? What's up, brother?
Well, I'm just stumbling upon the conversation in the middle, so I'm just want to listen and absorb and learn from. I got no questions. All I heard was about taxes or birth certificates and not presented, so I'm just learning. I'm saying back.
Okay, and so the question was asked about Texas. It's defined in Section 61.501 of the Educational Code for statistical or medical in Texas. So I can't do this for every state, y'all. It's not that hard. If you just Google education code birth certificate in your state, Google will likely pull up the for you and the government website where you can find the code. So that's what I would advise. But see, y'all have to be able to do this on your own. Me even saying code is irrelevant, right? Because you still are going to have to go and vet that I'm not just making stuff up. Don't take people's word for it. Don't ask me for that validation. Go do that research yourself. We need to start doing that as a people.
That was clear, Jay. Is that
okay? I'll look it up and take her word for it right now until I look it up.
Yeah, there's actually a PDF. It's called Birth Statutes, Texas Department of State Health Services, and it gives all the related codes. So it's a PDF you can even download, and it'll have all the codes relating to that for the state of Texas. And like I said, however your state does it, I don't know for the people listening, but you can research this in your own state. Just go to the Department of Education's website. The codes will be attached, or look up educational code in your state. And the code, if you read through the titles, because there's a lot of code, you'll be able to find what you're looking for. Sometimes they'll even have a searchable code where if you type in a word like birth certificate, it'll pull up all the code in the educational code or in the, you know, in the statute about that topic. In case you're not really good at like digging through the code like that, but it's much easier than people realize. Don't be overwhelmed with the sheer amount of code because it really is very searchable and comprehensive. It honestly is.
All right. One question that came to my mind, Irene, and there was an episode you were on a particular YouTube, I said panel, and you raise your children. I think you just said that when a person asked you, do you raise your children to be Black, Afrocentric in a way? And I think you recall you said you don't, but you raise children differently. I'm not sure you want to explain of I would say the difference on not raising your children into what they call Blackness, Afrocentric.
Well, I mean, here's the thing. We live in a Western society, right? So when we are taught things, the star of our history books, the star of the show is going to be European because this is a European colonized country. But let's just take history, for example. The European story from various parts of history throughout the world is going to be different than, let's say, the story of the indigenous people there, or the African story, or the Fijian story, or anybody else's perspective. And so instead of teaching the European story first, I would teach, the Black perspective first. Depending on, let's say we're using history as an example, depending on what part of history I'm teaching. So it could be blatantly an African perspective. If I'm teaching slavery, I'll teach it because I'm Geechee. I'll teach it from the Gullah Geechee perspective because our perspective of the abolishment of slavery sounds different than the official American perspective that's given. So that's all that I mean is that, our children go into these schools. There's a man that said, if you send your children to be educated by Caesar, don't be surprised if they come back Caesar's children. So I just like to teach from a non-European, Afrocentric, meaning just an Af-centered, even if I can use that, an Afro-centered perspective. And then before I teach the European perspective, I'll even teach other perspectives. And then I will also teach the European perspective because I think when we have different versions of the story, we come closer to the truth than when somebody's trying to play the star of their own story, which is typically how our children are taught now.
So, I think the question... Hold on. The question I asked that you don't teach them like Blackness, you only teach them the history from like what they call some of our history that's known that is not taught in regular school system. You teach them about the Gullah Geechees, the other things about slavery and be further before slavery. That's what am I right?
Yeah, I go back further before slavery, yes. Because our story isn't just slavery, that is part of our story.
No, it's 20. Yeah, go ahead. I'm gonna let you finish. Go ahead.
No, I mean, so yeah, like I'll teach, for example, I actually like to start with world history and work in. So that's how I actually do. When I was using history as like an example, I start world history and then I work my way inward. And that's just because I feel we have to be careful when we teach slavery because slavery currently is taught where it's not taught from a place of strength, right? And so I find that when they make slave movies and they teach slavery in school, it kind of gives an elitist sort of picture of whites, and I don't really like that. So I like to teach outward in because that gives me an opportunity to show the greatness of Black history throughout the world. And then we come to slavery, this great atrocity against these people who were so advanced, how we got there. And then when I teach slavery, I don't teach it from the slave owner's perspective, right? I teach it from, like I said, I start with the Gullah Geechee Nation and then other groups, those perspectives. And then we can look at slavery through that lens versus through the lens of the owner, which is how it's currently taught. We're taught from the lens of the slave owner. And I don't feel that's the healthiest way to teach it, per se. But yeah, I start outward, then I come in. So I start globally, and then I hone in.
To let everybody know, we about to go overtime in 5 minutes. Calling out to listen to Remainder Show. On Blog Talk, call in now. The number is 515-605-9783. I repeat, 515-605-9783. You have 5 minutes to call in if you want to participate in the show, or if you don't call before 5 minutes, it'll be go overtime and you go have to listen to Remainder Show on YouTube. And press one if you have a question or comment. Now, I hope you're aware, Irene, the Gullah Geechee, there are people that don't really take fun of people that goes outside of Gullah Geechee in regards to mating, to bring back into their land. You aware of that?
Well, yeah, because I'm Gullah, so I am aware of that.
Okay.
And they're also not fond of people leaving the islands. So, yeah.
Well, I'm not sure about that, but I know it's about the mating thing. People travel nonetheless. Well, you know one thing? I probably would, at the end of the show, send you a link to a book that I have laid that does a show monthly on here. And she wrote a book solely on the Gullah Geechee history. Very good book. On the history and stories of the people. So I think your children will love that. I would say you read
That's awesome. Thank you.
Excuse me, can I ask you a question? You say you're Gullah?
Yeah, I am.
You're Gullah? I thought you were, well, I'm just going based on what I'm hearing, but I thought you were European.
No,
Are you a European?
No, I'm not, and I'm not mixed. I'm just Gullah Geechee.
So you're a Black person? Is that
Yes,
what you're
ma'am.
saying? All right.
Yes, ma'am.
All right. Okay. It's all good. I just didn't hear that in your voice.
Yes, I am, though.
Yeah, well, I ain't gonna say much about that. But moving on.
What does the Black woman supposed to sound like? You know, we all diverse.
Excuse me. I said she didn't sound like a Black person. Okay, and if you got a problem with that, too bad. Her articulation, sir.
I know Black people that sound just like her, ma'am.
Okay.
Stay right there, Big J. I got to open this new line. Yes. All one. I ask one speak that you do?
Yeah, I just have a quick question. Can I ask what role, if any, did the Africans play in the slave trade?
Hello? Wait, hold on. Let me read this. I ask you who's this before you ask any questions, sir. Open your mic. Who's this?
That's the solution.
Hello? Mr. Solution? Okay, thank you. Ask your question, Mr. Solution. Please don't do that again.
What again?
Ask your question. Don't rush to ask your question. I gotta know who this is before I even, people ask questions.
Oh, okay, fine. My question is, and I was asking your guest, what role, if any, did the Africans play in the slave trade?
Yeah, well, I think we can look at passive roles, right? And then we can look at direct roles. So slavery isn't new, and it wasn't new in Africa. Some people were sold. Of course, they didn't know what they were selling them into. They probably thought it would look much like what they had there was like indentured servitude slavery. And then there was the passive participation that they had, which is to not put an active fight up for the people that were actually even stolen. So I guess we could look at it in both ways. Or once it became common knowledge, because, you know, slavery went on for a few hundred years, once it became common knowledge of what was happening to the Africans that were being brought to the states, that there wasn't a major uprising or a slaughtering of any individuals that came to the continent to obtain slaves, or a slaughtering of those people who still opted to sell slaves or help to capture slaves for, you know, for the thieves that were coming for them either. So I guess I look at the role that they played in two ways, which is the active participation and then the passive sort of enabling that went on.
Okay. Was the answer now, Mr. Solution?
Yes, I think that was a sufficient answer. Thank you.
All right. Let me see what's on the line. All ones, who's this?
Hey, good evening. It's Gigi. Good evening.
Stay right there, Gigi. Stay right there.
Hi, how you
doing? I got it. Hold on, Gigi.
May I speak
Let me see
now?
what's on the line. No, you gotta wait.
Okay.
Somebody's raised their hand. 847, who's this?
Nigga, this Taz, what up? I keep mad as hell.
All right, Gigi.
Don't mute me either, motherfucker.
Wow. Gigi, what's your question?
Hi, I want to say hi to the guest. Thank you. Very interesting conversation. The lady's name is Irene.
Yes, ma'am.
The guest, hi. I was wondering, you said that you're 100% Geechee, Gullah Geechee, and you said that sometimes those folks look down upon when people leave that area.
When they move out permanently, yeah. And it's also caused problems having people move away because a lot of the land is communal. Well, all of the Gullah Geechee land is communal land. And so something that we have experienced because of people that move away, like my family did, is they come back, take a claim to the land, and then if they can't be bought out, then we lose our land and they sell it to white people, basically. So, yeah. But it is frowned upon.
Oh, really?
So your whole family, Gary, Miss Irene, your entire family left the area?
Not my entire family, but yeah. But the branch that I'm from, like my great grandparents did leave the area. They went west, and so I'm from San Francisco. That's where I'm from. And my great grandfather was in San Francisco until about 3 years ago when he passed away. So yeah.
So was he like in the Navy or something?
He didn't join the armed forces. He was a builder, so he helped build a lot of the infrastructure when the city was getting established.
Wow. Now, when you left with the father of your children left with you to go to California?
No, I wasn't born in Gullah country. You know, the older people in my family moved and had children. You know what I mean? And so that's how I ended up being there. So I wasn't born in the Carolinas or the Georgias. I wasn't born in Gullah Geechee country.
So how often do you get to go back, or do you get to go back?
I don't go back very often. I don't get to go back very often, unfortunately. But I need to do that because I'm not as active in participation as far as protecting our land. And it's becoming a big thing to preserve our culture. Like a lot of people don't speak Gullah anymore and things like that. So as I'm seeing this, because it's always been the older people who have kept things going, I think a lot of us are feeling more compelled to be supportive of that net because we're kind of being left out at this point.
And Gary said you wrote a book about the culture?
No, he said somebody else wrote a book and he was going to send it to me. thought I'd find it interesting.
Oh, Dr. Talazze, I think her name was. Yeah, she's very interesting guest. Oh, thank you for talking to me. I'm done.
Yes, ma'am.
Irene, before we continue on this conversation, I just want to clear up some things because people are going to go back to this playback and they're going to think because how you talk, you sound like a white girl. So I'm going to let people know right now. Let's go listen to this recording. The person I have here is a black woman. All right? Yeah, she was once married to a white person and she has big kids. All right? So if anybody want to know, that cuts the bullshit out right now. All right?
Ain't no bullshit. I asked the legitimate question. Wait a minute. You don't have to. She don't care for herself. You don't have to even do that. This is ridiculous. What is Gary saying? I didn't even hear him. He said she's married to a white person.
Yeah, I'm doing this. Guys, hold on. I'm doing this for people who's going to go back to the playback. And they're going to think that I bring a white girl onto the platform. I'm clearing this up right now. I'm a Gary. Gary.
There's a difference between bringing a white girl and a white man's ex-wife.
White man, ex-wife. White man.
No, you just put it out there. I mean, you didn't have to say that. But what I wanted to work on is was to talk about the Social Security card thing. Because like you do our people a disservice when you start taking away what little resources we do have. Because right now in this country, we know we're fighting an uphill battle. So unless you have those type of resources, you shouldn't be taking yourself off of the government's radar per se. Because a lot of our children do need Medicare, Medicaid, that type of shit. And that's just the way it is. So to tell our people to not get Social Security cards and sign birth certificates, I just don't think that helps us in the future. Just because of where we are financially and economically in this country. That type of shit is for sovereign citizens. And that's part of the sovereign movement is to not associate yourself with government documents and shit. But as far as black people, we're not in that type of position to claim a sovereign movement. So I just think that's a bad idea. That's bad advice.
Well, first of all, Shannon, I thought you had a voice twin for a second there. But first of all, happy to hear from you. Yes.
Hey, nigga, she know who I am. Relax, man. The cops, it's him, the cops.
Second of all, that's what I was saying earlier. I was saying a lot of people, I agree with you, don't have that option because they really do need some of those government services. So that I understand. My goal is just to provide the information. And like I said, if your income is meager, there are ways that you can stretch that income. Each person has to make their own individual choice, and that's what I keep stressing. It is a lot harder, even if you're not dirt poor. It's a lot harder even for me to live this way. So it's a harder way to live. It means that you can't pull from other resources. You have to manifest things yourself. And that is difficult, let's say, because everybody doesn't have a trade or, everybody doesn't code or things like that. Like everybody doesn't have a skill that they can use or a hustle. So it can be more difficult. But, and this is like one of those times where I wish that I had the opportunity to speak to people individually about their situations and see if we can make it work for them. Do you know what I mean? But unfortunately, I don't have that ability. Each person has to take time, assess what changes they can make, and if this is feasible for them. And if nothing else, for those of you who choose to participate in the system, I just encourage you to do it with an understanding of the choice that you're making, because I feel a lot of people simply make the choice because everybody else is doing it and they don't realize that there are other options. And so if you choose that path, that's great. One of my adult children chose that path, but everybody may not choose that path. And if you have the ability to not make that choice for your child, then try to not make that choice for them, try to give them the opportunity to make the choice for themselves. And I think that's more what I'm advocating for. But I do agree with you that it's not a possibility for a lot of our community. It's harder for them than it is for, you know, other groups of people. I do completely agree with that.
Okay. So here's my point of contention. So,
somebody's calling from the jailhouse? No. Oh, shit. Time is running out. Your time is, you got 2 minutes. Okay. What's that? Somebody calling from the prison house. I told you. They probably got like a minute left.
Oh, shit. Yeah, I mean, make sure that's not that on. Oh, no. Is that Taylor?
Yeah, that wasn't mine. Okay. Yeah, I like it. It is. Oh gosh, I got that's up, man. But like you said, Irene, yeah, I mean, people choose that. But one thing with tax brought up a point because remember, a lot of people don't know how to heal themselves, and they have to depend on hospitals. So, like I said, I would not recommend something that I don't really do, but I tell people there's many options that they could take it, you know, especially with children. That's the whole purpose of the conversation. There's more than one way to go about certain things. I don't want people to be like that and just think they're going one way.
Can you hear me?
Yeah, go ahead.
You see, that's my point of contention. Okay, if you understand the layout of Black Americans right now, okay, here's my point of contention. If it's difficult for even you, right, and you got Black folk, for the most part, more than 2/3 living under the poverty line, it is irresponsible to tell them to do something or encourage them to do something that's going to make their life even harder. Secondly, if they're under the poverty line, that means that they're working jobs right now with such low wages that they still qualify for government aid programs. So these ideas, they're just nonsense talking about government handout when people are paying into the system just for the sole purpose that in any case they find themselves below the poverty line one day, just like a whole heap of Black folks who just in 2016 were living a middle-class lifestyle, and here they are 2018, the taxes basically gone up, and now they no longer live that middle-class lifestyle. Now you tell them that they're do something to basically give all of their rights away and trade them in for privileges that can be yet again taken away at any given time. Basically reducing them not only to a second-class citizen, but as well as a guest in the house of America. That's irresponsible socially. Now, a more viable solution, the Black folks to get politically organized, organize the economics, build the institutions that will execute policy on our behalf. We have enough people in politics right now that's making enough money right now that it can actually happen. There's enough money in the Black community that within a year, just on $30 a month, you can have your own, political action committee, your own legal action committee, similar to what you have with the ACLU. You have enough money in the Black community within a single year, just taking the money away from the Black church to have your own urban land developer, your own Black-owned urban land developer, a nationwide Black urban land developer, and where you don't need HUD anymore. You don't need the policy because at the point the resources are collectivized, you can buy the land that you want. You say that's a more viable solution. A lot of this other magical thinking of we're going to go off the massive amount of Black folk going off of the birth bonding system and placing their children in the next generation. Literally, you're not freeing them, but you're actually setting them up for abject poverty to be treated like a guest that can be, excommunicated from general society at any time. So if they find themselves working by any chance, then the next thing you know, they find themselves under the poverty line. Guess what? They don't get any state assistance. They don't get any access to vocational rehabilitation programs that are also federally funded.
Yeah, so that's the thing is nobody will lose their citizenship or anything like that, but you will lose, and I've been very forward about that, you will lose the ability to take social services, social health care, those things you cannot do without a social security card. You can do them without a birth certificate, but you cannot do them without a social security card. And so again, that is responsible choice. The rest of what you were talking about, I think, is an excellent plan, and that can be done with or without a birth certificate or social security card. You can still vote without a birth certificate and social security card, people. You can still do most things. What you can't do is get money. That's what you can't do. You can't get money or things that are likened to money. So you can't get free medical through state. You can't, as Cerulean pointed out earlier, work for the government because you do have to have those documents to work for our government, state or local, state or federal.
But see, that's the point I'm making. If you understand that your fight right now is political and economic, and you don't have anybody that you can put in the government, say we all don't have birth certificates. You have nobody working in the government that can help influence policy. Therefore, you're basically leaving yourself at the complete mercy of your enemies, both political.
Okay, so a question to you and to you, Cerulean, and to Irene. Then my question to you is, what be y'all's first target? What will be the first target to deal with? Would it be the redlining? Would it be the discriminatory practices in gentrification or rent or education? What will be the first target? Or is it just whatever is there a list?
The first, I went over the 2019 fiscal year budget with our esteemed brethren, Tori and Irene. The place where I would first do that would be in a federal jobs guarantee. And then put that on the list before, the white opioid junkies get to it first next year. As you can see in the 2019 fiscal year budget, basically cleaning up all of these opioid junkies, these white opioid junkies, and I basically projected that. I projected that the 2020 fiscal year budget will be a federal jobs guarantee for basically white males or recovering opioid junkies. And so the first place I would target is a federal jobs guarantee. Second thing I would actually target is at a living wage. The living wage basically will put in salary caps on executives, corporate executives put a salary cap on. So that way, corporate executives can make more than 15 times the amount of the lowest paid worker. And if a corporation doesn't want to adhere to that statute or that law, then they don't have to do business. I mean, those are straightforward policy that we actually do have the power to employ right now, but it requires especially a massive amount of black folk to just quite frankly get their heads out of their asses with all this magical nonsense.
Okay, okay. So with that budget, so are you going to? Is the plan? Is the Gray Faulkner plan? Are y'all trying to do this on? I know I asked this before. I didn't get the. I forgot what the answer was. So, are you trying to do this state by state, or are you trying to do this as a nationwide effort first?
One is a plan that anyone that's in any state that's black can actually employ in their own locale, because it requires really three parts, right? One part is political, one part is going out and getting the resources you need, meaning convincing black folks to collectivize their money into a central location that is not the Black church.
Can I make a comment? You know, you spoke about rights, and the rights that I see that are available to people who live in poverty, they're eroding fast. In fact, people who get food stamps and any kind of other assistance, even health care, usually can't even afford to get sick because they can't pay the difference on the treatment that they're getting, or for their pharmaceuticals, or for just food. They're putting all kind of restrictions on young people who have families, where they have to submit to some type of work program, interrupting their schooling to receive food stamps. Not enough to feed their family for the month. So in terms of what rights you get for having a birth certificate and social security card, it's questionable today.
I really have to agree with you. Sorry.
I'm going right ahead.
Oh, thank you. I just was going to say, I think it's really important to remember, too, when we talk about social safety net, cash aid is now capped with welfare reform. I think it is at 5 years. I think it is 4 or 5 years. There's a cap for how long you can be on these programs. So even when we're making these choices, we have to recognize with the new systems that are in place. And I've worked very closely with a lot of Department of Human Health programs for a decade. When we look at these nets that are in place, there are caps to them. It's not a comfortable position to be in. And again, there's that loss of personal sovereignty and rights that you lose. Your loss of privacy, your exposure and your child's exposure to the system of Child Protective Services, your inability for non-compliance. Those things are really stripping you for a temporary benefit because there are now caps to these programs. Gone are the days of being able to get these recurring programs on long term. And I want to say that for social welfare programs such as medical, you actually can receive them without a Social Security number. They zero your Social Security number out and you have to reapply every 30 days. But actually you can effectively receive some of these benefits without a Social Security number or a birth certificate. So, but I do understand and I don't disagree with political action. And to answer the brother's question, I would start with education, and I like Cerulean's cap of not earning more than 12 times. Was it then the lowest paid worker or the highest paid worker? I'm not sure. But I think that makes sense because there does need to be a check and balance there. Again, though, everybody has to make an individual choice. The thing is that just be informed about the options you have and decide if that choice is going to be right for you. Because there are some programs you can participate in. There are some you cannot participate in. There are some you can participate in short term. Like I said, for medical, you can get new medical certification every 30 days with no Social Security number or birth certificate. You can't get long-term medical. But if you go to the hospital, they'll apply. You'll have it for 30 days. If you have a doctor's appointment for your child or you, they'll apply. You'll have it for 30 days. They'll simply zero out your Social Security number. So there are loopholes to this. But again, it's hard without having real one-on-one conversations with people to really say what would work in your situation. You're going to have to be the person to assess that about your own life because unfortunately, I wish I could though, y'all just don't know. Like I wish I could sit down and simply talk to people and get them to work collectively in programs, find out how we can pool resources, how we can do homeschooling for our children. Like I have a million plans for that, but it's hard to just throw out a plan when I don't know an individual circumstance, what the net around them looks like and things like that, which is why we have to be our own advocates, people. We have to do that.
All right, Cerulean, you was about to say something? Okay, you in the background, brother?
No, I'm listening. You know, I'm just looking at this thing realistically. Okay. The sister said, you know, the rights as a citizen with a birth certificate are eroding. This is true. The reason why this is happening is, quite frankly, black folks chase the political Super Bowl instead of focusing on what they can do in their own locale. So they get riled up for the presidential election, completely ignore the regular season. And that's been one of our greatest problems in the last 35 years. See, right now, I'm looking at it in a realistic way. That's pragmatic. Let's just drop all of the extra stuff. Let's go with what we know. You have a group of people, 45 million roughly, and about 30 million of them living under the poverty line. Okay? 35 million living under the poverty line. Now, 35 million are living under the poverty line. What does that mean for a person without a birth certificate?
Good question.
So that means a complete 100% destabilization of the entire community. That means at the complete mercy for people to basically treat you any kind of way. I mean, they already treating you any kind of way.
Right.
They already treating you any kind of way. Now you're gonna get treated worse because you don't have a birth certificate, because they don't have to respect your rights because you don't have any rights as a citizen. All your rights are privileges now.
You keep saying that, Cerulean, but you do have rights as a citizen. The government accepts other things other than a birth certificate to reserve your rights as a citizen. I gave a whole list of things that they accept. You just can't use social.
Before you even get to the birth certificate, okay? Rights are secured by a collective group with their economics. That's how rights are really secured. They use their economics for political action. That's how rights are actually secured. Not just secured, but enforced. See, you talk about a group of people who already have a problem enforcing their own rights, right? Their own constitutionally granted rights. And then you want them to trade that in for no birth certificate, in which even those that they would be able to enforce, they have the inability to enforce because they are not technically a citizen, but just a long-term resident. They are
citizens. They are citizens. I read from the government website. They're still citizens. Don't lose your citizenship.
You know the difference between a citizen and a resident?
Yes, they're citizens, not residents. I just read from the government website. That is proof of citizenship. Your hospital birth record. That's proof.
Wait. Irene. So really, what's the difference between a citizen and a resident? Because people are here, we should go by definition. So it would be clarified.
All of those things that you take away. Say, for instance, you start working a job, you get injured on the job, then you can't go back to work for the next 5 years. You draw on your Social Security, or you don't have access to that anymore. So you're getting treated any kind of way. These are all tied into economics. So how you enforce your rights are through economics. That's what really makes you a citizen. See, that's the only reason why black folk right now aren't being mass incarcerated at a higher rate than they already are. It's because of that citizenship is being recognized. And how is it being enforced? It is being enforced at the government level, the federal government level, which you can't even work for unless you have a birth certificate.
But let me say you can vote.
Magical thinking. How are you going to execute anything? You don't have anybody that works in the government. You're basically locked out of being able to join the military, which is your right, right? Working for the government in this country is a right, which you don't have if you don't have no birth certificate. policy. That's the difference between a right and a citizen and a resident. And so if you can't work for the government, which means that you cannot influence policy that benefits your group, how is taking black folk off of the birth certificate, 30 million blacks, that'll be roughly 2/3 of blacks. How is taking 2/3 of them off the birth certificate going to help them?
But you keep saying that, but I never said that this is an option for everybody. I said over and over that each person has to assess their personal situation. Second of all, technically speaking, a passport allows you to work in place of a social security card, and there are some exceptions for governmental positions. You also can vote showing a passport, and a passport can be obtained without a birth certificate or social security card. You don't lose your citizenship. The limitations that you find will come by way of things like receiving welfare benefits and things that you can go ahead and
get a passport without a birth certificate.
That's what I was talking about earlier. You can go to travel states.
You don't get a passport without a birth certificate.
You can get a passport without a birth certificate. Go ahead and go to travelstate.gov.
Make contact.
Wait. Just to be clear, is that nationally, or does that rule apply state by state?
For all people in the United States, if you do not have a birth certificate or social security card, you can legally obtain a passport. I mentioned all the steps earlier in the program. You can go to travelstate.gov, and they give you specific criteria for obtaining your passport without a birth certificate. In brief, you need a letter of no record from your vital statistics, just saying I don't have a birth certificate. You give them the information, they give you a piece of paper saying you don't exist in our records. You need a signed affidavit from the mother and the father, or two people present for the birth of the child. You can sign that with a notary or at the passport office. There's a form on travelstate.gov that they require. Just print it off, fill it out, take early birth records. That could be a crib sheet. That could be from your baby's first baby visit. That can be your Bible where you wrote down that your child was born. Take those to the passport office. That's how you legally obtain that document. If you look at your I-9, you will see that you can have a passport as proof of your citizenship, or two items from column B, which is what everybody tends to use, which is a picture ID and a social security card. It is an either-or situation. One document, a passport, replaces those other documents, and you retain your citizenship. This is fact. This is not my opinion. And if you don't think I'm correct, feel free to vet my information by going to the government's website and checking it out for yourself. Again, travelstate.gov is the office that issues passports for United States citizens, and you can clearly see there that what I'm saying is 100% accurate. And if you need to also look at the code, I know some people were asking for that, the corresponding code is there too. So these aren't a matter of opinion. You can work without a birth certificate or social security card. You can vote without a birth certificate or social security card. These items are not required, although I agree with Cerulean that there is a percentage of the Black community that is poor and that may very well need these social safety nets. I am in no way suggesting that everybody do this. I'm suggesting that if you can not violate your child's personal rights by getting them these documents and give them the leeway to make that choice for themselves, that you do that, because you bind yourself. You bind yourself to having to pay federal and state taxes. You bind yourself to a list of things when you make these choices for your child. They automatically have to pay into Social Security, which is a retirement program, which some people may need if you can't be fiscally responsible, or if you don't have the means or know how to save. These programs may benefit you. But if you're willing to put in the extra work and live a life that's a little less comfortable, that means you're going to have to work hard, and you're not going to be able to take out loans for every little thing. That means that you won't be able, if things go wrong, like Cerulean said, to get on social welfare. If you're willing to make those sacrifices, then by all means, I encourage you to do that, keeping in mind that there still are programs you can use. You still can use federal medical, but it's on a 30-day per basis. It's not something that you'll have all the time. It's something you'll have to reapply for every 30 days or as you need the services. You can still educate your children in public schools if you cannot homeschool like I do. You don't lose all of those benefits, but you do lose some of those benefits. And as Cerulean pointed out, there are almost all government jobs will not be jobs you can have. You will not be able to join the military. So those are things that you're going to have to accept, or if it's not something that is an acceptable thing to you, then you may choose to get those documents. I just feel that for our children, they should have the choice and be provided with the education to decide if that's what they want to do with their life. I don't think that parents should make that choice to bind their children into a system that you cannot walk away from. Let each individual make that choice for themselves. That's what I feel. I'm not advocating for this is for everybody. Like I said, out of my many children, one of my elder children has chosen to go that route. And that's his choice, and I respect it because it was an educated choice, and it was his choice. It was not a choice that I made for him. And so that is essentially what my message overall is.
In better words, is when he got
right, I didn't force him. Right, he made that choice himself from an educated place.
Well, you know, Irene, funny thing, Irene, because I asked this question and it's bringing a lot of attention, is because people should know enough of their rights that we don't really look into. Now, even going at an extreme that you said and where they work or not, okay. But the point is, you brought this up for people that it's a choice if they want their children to go, if they don't want their children to be subject to the state or land. Now, mind you, a lot of our people today are not going to go have first. Now, I don't want most people to have anything. They should make a decision what they want to do with their lives and what they want to do for the lives of their children. Now, every decision they make, they always got to be aware it might not be the great one, or it might be the one that might just be the greatest. But then these are options that people know that is out there. Because one thing is evident with information, people don't really look into information enough. They really look into what are the options. Because once you go in this world, they say you have no options. You go this way, or you don't go nowhere at all. And I want people just to get the option, or you have options to take it any way you want to see fit. You got to take the power again. They give the power to people that's not best interest. So that was the purpose why I asked you that question, and you answered. Yes, you don't get a lot of pushback, but it's natural.
No, I think that's okay, and I respect other people's points of view. And like I said, we all just have to make these choices for ourselves. But I think it's important that we make our choices from an educated perspective, not because everybody else did it, not because we were ignorant and didn't know any different. Know that there are options, and then pick your option. And what we choose to do with our lives because it's best for us is our choice. And I'm not here to stand judgment to that, but I am here to share information that I know a lot of people don't realize because it is not commonplace, but it is legal and it is an option. And it's important that we know this. And again, I encourage you, feel free to vet what I am telling you. I haven't made anything up or misrepresented anything. You are capable of finding this information on your own and educating yourself. And even if you do nothing else but pass this knowledge on to your little ones so that they know something that you didn't, we are doing better because we participate in a system that we don't understand. I know when I mentioned the Office of Human Capital today, a lot of people had probably never heard of it, yet it authors your parks, your schools, your social welfare programs, your libraries. It authors what goes on with your taxes. It's referenced in presidential orders regarding your life. So we have to understand freedoms are, what our options as sovereign individuals are, and if we choose to accept or waive those, that's our personal choice, and that's okay. But I encourage you to waive those things from an educated place. And I encourage you to allow your children the freedom to make those choices on them for themselves and to not make those choices for them if you can. And that's a big if. You're not going to get that earned income tax credit. You're not going to be able to go get, a cash aid for them. I think you can still get food stamps, but you can't get cash aid. Like, there's going to be a list of things you cannot do that might make your life easier to protect their ability to choose. But as a
least you're saying, at least you're letting people know at least that point that, you're giving them the ins and outs.
Yeah, like I don't want to be fake about this. I want to be honest because it's important that we know what we're getting into, right? When we make these choices.
And it's good that you're encouraging for them to do their research, to double check, triple check, and make sure that it's not just what you're saying, that is confirmed on, by those authorities, if you want to say.
Yeah, and when I talk about these things on my page, we go to the sites together and I provide all the information and the links, and they can go visit. And I use government websites. I don't use side stuff because our government's the one that's got to accept these moves, right? Because really, they're the boss. So I keep it very legit and above board, but still, you can even get more in depth in the things that I show you and take you to. Don't believe anybody, not even me. You do the work for yourself, and then you will know the truth because you've done the work for yourself. That's what I had to do, and I really encourage everybody else to do the same. I honestly do.
And another thing, is that, but no, and it's like this, and I never told you before, because you don't watch TV. You go on. I mentioned the Moors run their mouth on the same thing on the sovereignty package too, where they have people pay money to be sovereign. We know that's not the case, but you see, because people listen to people, they don't really do the research, So we have people out here in the community scamming people over some shit they know is not reality. But in regards to the children and the births, that's something we could control. That's a fact. But in regards to ourselves, once we into the system, we can't get out of the system like that. It's not reality. And the problem our people feel say, I can save myself or I save my kids, but really you can't because you're already in the system already. Now for your children, because they just come out of your womb, that's optional, And people don't know that. Well, they always try to put the emphasis on people that's already in the system to get them out. But that is not the reality. And I think you've proven that. I believe tonight. Because, we have people on here, that said they offer something to get people out, but people got to pay them money, And obviously when they go pay the money, it doesn't work in their favor because they could probably do more damage than good. So you kind of brought a different perspective tonight in that.
Or you could end up in jail or with your assets frozen. Like, I'm not with the free man movements and the Moors, like you're mentioning. Like, I'm not with those movements. I'm not here to blow smoke up anybody's butt or to pull out some abstract laws and things that nobody can understand and do anything with or tell you uppercase this, lowercase that. Like, I'm not on that yet. But I will provide you with solid things that I know are truth and that are applicable to real life and that are usable in real life so that if you decide you can, or if nothing else, you're just armed with the knowledge because it's good to know. If nothing else, it's just good to know what our landscape looks like so that you know that you have choices. Because when you don't know that you have options, you have no options, right? So it's good to know what the real options are. And yeah, don't ever fall for that. And I don't ask for money for mine. I just put the videos up when people ask for them because this is nothing you need to pay for. This is all public information. It's not a flippin' secret, y'all. And I would be leery of those movements. Like you're saying, like you take people's money and they put them in positions where you're really vulnerable to get yourself in trouble is really what I feel.
Anybody else has any further questions? We already passed over time. Anybody else have any questions? Speak now. Very holy peace.
Anybody on mute?
Nope. No one's on mute. Alright, I guess people are quiet. I guess everything has been answered tonight. So that's why I'm going to do now.
Can I say something? I just want to thank Cerulean for coming through, and also Taz. Cerulean, I really do appreciate a lot of your perspective and all genuineness, and I agree with a great deal of them. And I always like Shannon Taz to come through and speak because he loves to hold my feet to the fire, and I think that's good because.
Sorry about that. You gonna say?
No, I was just going to say I think it keeps us sharp to have our ideas and beliefs challenged and to have other things presented. And I think it's important that people have access to all of that, right? Because there's always something that you can take from what you hear that's beneficial. So I think that that's awesome. I wasn't expecting that, and I'm very pleased that it went that way.
Okay, you guys. So that was fun for me. It wasn't fun for anybody else, though, was it? Because I feel like people are so mad at this video. So with that said, that was the interview that I did. And I hope that you guys enjoyed it. I know we were very, very, very silly in the chat. And yes, Soto Nation, No Sex Before Marriage is going to be the next live. I'm not sure when we'll do it, but we will do it in the next couple days. So if I go live and my topic's different, just remind me and I'll change it. It's not a big deal because my memory is shot. But yes, that is the plan. No Sex Before Marriage being the next live. And then I also promised I would do a live on books. And I have an upcoming video on home birth that I've promised. And you guys can always contact me and let me know because you know I like to do stuff that you guys like. So what I do need to know is how you post a show that is not live as in a live hangout. How do you show video? Yeah, you can screen share. Or you can just upload it regularly, RBR. So, get wrecked. No. So with that said, I'm going to go. Y'all sat through 2.5 hours of this. I know people were very upset when they came to this live, and it was not really a live. But it was just much easier to do this, and it was less time consuming than trying to upload this interview for you guys. But next time it will be a real live. So, but with that said, I hope that the content was interesting. I hope you guys had fun fooling around in the chat with me. Obviously, you know, I just enjoyed the chilled back atmosphere of this because I don't normally get to be in the chat with you guys as much when I do my lives. So that made me very happy. Hi, Super T. Good night, get wrecked. And no, it wasn't a live. It wasn't a live. It's live, but it was not a live. So yeah, so that was fun. I liked fooling around in the chat with you guys, and that's something I can't do normally. So with that said, I will talk to you guys tomorrow because my turkey soup is done and my daughter baked some French bread from scratch. I tasted it. It tastes very good. It tastes like it's rosemary French bread, actually. And oh, you wanted to hear the radio show. Dope, Frantonio. I feel like we covered a lot of ground in that radio show. And so I appreciated that. I liked getting that out. Those are the kind of conversations I want to have. I told you I did another build that was really productive, but the audio got snatched. So I hope that it can be resolved because I would like to get that up for you guys too. You know, if something's not majority, like headed in a positive direction, I don't like to put it up on the channel. And so I felt like this one was okay, and that's why I wanted to share it with you guys. So with that said, yes, get wrecked. You need to stop. With that said, I'll talk to all you guys later. And yeah, I hope you guys are looking forward to that No Sex Before Marriage show. I know that's exactly what everybody wants to hear. So, bye.